Today I want to share a bit of a mini course I created on how to use slow life activities to interrupt and retrain your dopamine loop. Let's go. We know how that can go. All right, so rainy day plans. What do we do here? Well, we support slow, mindful, intentional lifestyles that impact the energetic development of children, which is not something a lot of people talk about. They talk about their academic, right? Their cognitive development. It's not just an accident. Like we can develop our energetic self. Dopamine response is like one of the best things we have as humans. To quote John Steinbeck, it's said that humans are never satisfied. And it's said with disparagement when in fact it's our greatest attributes. Is, in other words, our desire to do more, explore more, have more, learn more, all those things. So that's really unique in humans. And one of the reasons for that is this dopamine response, although all animals have the dopamine response. So it's a neurochemical brain body loop that provides internal feedback. Internal means it's like physically internal, could be mentally internal, you or to avoid some kind of behavior that will ensure our survival. Right? And so we are an animal and we have this in us, and it was based on the natural world. The natural world is a slow place with sudden experiences sprinkled in, right? But otherwise, it's a pretty slow type of thing. And what the dopamine response does is it impacts our motivation, and it does that through sensation. So the motivation is saying, yeah, I want to do that, right? The drive, the impulse to do something for our survival. And the feedback we're getting is through sensation, which is not the world we're living in 100% all the time. Okay, so here's how it works. You probably have seen this, you probably know this, but just in case you don't, we're living life. And we see something, it's curious, it's like, oh, that's a cue, a trigger, we're curious about it. We interact with it, we start wondering what's going to happen. And then we do something and the thing happens, right? And if there's a reward, if it's a pleasurable thing that happens, we're like, ooh, yay. And that's the signal to us to continue to do that or to do that again. And of course, if it's a bad thing, it tastes terrible, it scares us, whatever, then response is like, okay, don't do that anymore. So that's kind of how the dopamine response works. So I know I've got the word loop in there, but it's the response, right? Then we go, oh, yay, that was delicious, right? That was delicious, or that felt great. And then we go on with life. We go back out into the field, we go back out hunting, we go back to laying around in the tree, whatever it is we're doing. And in that time we get bit by mosquitoes, or we stub our toe, or the sunshine feels warm on us. So there's all these layers of things that are both pleasant and unpleasant throughout the day. And then all of a sudden we come across that thing, that cue again. And it's like, not only now am I anticipating something will happen, I'm kind of like, I remember that. I remember what happened. Oh, I want that again. So that's our craving. We're going to go and take that action. We're going to be like, that's right. So I'm going to eat them. And this time, instead of eating them like, oh, I'm just going to take my time and wonder about it, we're going to eat them. Sure enough, right? Reward, pleasure. Yay, that was delicious again. And we should then just continue on with life. And that cue will continue to help us thrive, right? So in our modern society, we've started to, especially in the last 10, 15 years, sort of squeezed together more experiences, and we've highlighted the ups and downs a little bit more. So those ups and downs are no longer just a little sunshine that we like and a stubbed toe that we don't like, but all the problems are big problems, and the celebrations need to be big celebrations. So we're kind of going through life and there's more dissatisfaction, because the truth is more is never enough, right? To quote the greatest showman, it'll never be enough because it just isn't. It can't. It's impossible. It feeds into the craving, right? The cue is always going to lead to a craving. The cue doesn't lead to satisfaction. So, the unhappy times and whatever, maybe we feel like there's more and more and more of them. So we really want that thing, that action or that substance or that food or whatever it is. And so now we might start seeking it out a little bit more. It's like, that's right. I know exactly where to go for those berries. I know where to go. I don't have to be wandering about and hope I come across them. I'll go straight to those things and be like, oh, yeah, that's right. These are the berries. And then maybe you're like, oh, I don't know. Do they taste the same? And so we get that action. We compress the action. So it's a quicker action and an easier action. So why do we want it to be an easier action? Because the two main things that help us survive, our species to survive, is efficiency and, of course, reproduction. And then food. And food keeps us going. But the reproduction is what helps us live on as a species. And what that really boils down to is I want to be included, recognized, and liked. And then it goes in all sorts of places from there. So what happens when we have a society that's like, here, do this thing, whammo, you get a reward. Wait, do this thing again, whammo, you get a reward. So when they're so close together, then that's when we've really, not only do we have a dopamine loop, but it's been hacked, meaning the stimulus is not something from nature, because nothing from nature can do that I'm aware of. Maybe you have some ideas, can give us some ideas about what that might be. But I haven't thought of any. I haven't read of any reading I've done on this subject. It's like the natural world is paced exactly right. Right? It's slow, methodical, cyclical, with sudden bursts of something. But the most obvious one is when we scroll, the easiest of movements allows you to keep going. Now, why is that more of a hacking kind of dopamine loop than something that just automatically goes to the next show? For example, if you're watching TV, like from a long time ago, they had TV shows, and if you didn't turn it off, it just went to the next show. It's because that was automatic. This is, if you notice, number 3 is you have to do an action. Doing this action is part of the dopamine loop. Observing is not. So we see something, we anticipate or crave it, we do an action, and we get some sort of pleasure. And in that scrolling kind of thing, the pleasure is a relief of the anticipation. That's what, so like we create a problem and relieve the problem, create a problem, relieve the problem. We're never actually getting anything that's adding to our survival, like food, like warmth, like company, relationship. We're just, the relief is the reward, right? And it's the relief from the anticipation. And that because it is faster and faster, the anticipation is also heightened because it is also compressed. So it's not just a shorter period of time, it expands in intensity. And that intensity is not in our cognitive space, it's in our nervous system space. And that's the anxiety and the panicky feeling, the jitteriness, sudden inability to focus. Well, yeah, of course not. We're a whole nother part of your brain body has been taken over by something. And so even when we walk away from it, that dopamine loop is still searching for the relief, right? Isn't this amazing? It's so amazing. But in other words, social media was set up intentionally to hack the dopamine loop, to be like, oh yeah, if we can get people to keep doing it, that's better and better for us. So never fear. Like now we know. Now most of us know, but knowing is not the same as, responding neurologically, neurochemically. And so what we're having to do is choose ways of breaking out of that. And the reason it's so difficult is because so much of those, so much of that dopamine loop, that hacked dopamine loop, is now embedded in our life. And when I say life, I don't mean like in our luxury lives, in our work, and then communicating with people, and then wanting to keep track of each other and our children and our students, and get feedback and give feedback and make sure things are correct. All of that has been made faster and faster and faster. And now I also have a theory on that, but I'm wondering if one of the reasons I feel like life is going by so fast is because it literally is. We know time is relative, right? Time is not a constant and equal thing everywhere. And I feel like if things move faster, we're not actually saving time. We're actually just shrinking it. But this is a theory. I would love it if somebody would like to study that and tell me if I'm right or wrong. Albert Einstein. Okay. How do we use slow life activities to interrupt that hacked system and then to retrain it? Because we don't want to get rid of it. We definitely want to use dopamine to motivate us to reach our goals. So there are 4 ways that we can. It doesn't have to be all 4, but when we choose an activity that does one or more of these things, that's going to help counteract, interrupt, and maybe even retrain our brain for considering that dopamine loop. Okay. So observing with curiosity, anything that makes you do that is going to be a slow life activity that reduces that impulsivity. Nobody really likes this, especially kids, but experience frustration. We want to close the process. So what that means is it's the opposite of that endless scroll. But when we pick something that has a beginning and an end, and it can be in lots of different ways, then we are interrupting that hijacked loop. It's like, oh, we've ended something. So that's another one. And then this one, I think a lot of people have heard about, delay gratification. It's kind of over the last several years almost become a joke, right? Like, oh boy, I want to delay. I want instant gratification, not delay gratification. But that truly does interrupt that. It's probably the most important one, to interrupt the dopamine loop, because if you're not getting the reward immediately, then you're not stuck in the loop. You have to wait for it. Okay, so let's look at what that actually might mean, what it might look like. Sorry, I don't know how to get me out of the way. Can I get me out of the way? I don't know. Maybe not. Anyway, so what that does, right? So curiosity means you encountering an unfamiliar stimulus. Aside from, oh, I wonder which video is next, right? That's not unfamiliar. That's just, I want to know more. And that's the anticipation and craving. Unfamiliar is like, what's this? Where did this come from? How does this work? Right? And so it slows down that impulsiveness. It makes us observe and go, is this something that I should be engaging with? The frustration, problem to solve, what that does on many neurochemical levels is it, sorry, let's squish together. it actually pushes energy out of the limbic system, which is the part that's making us do this repetitive, like non-focused part. It pushes energy into the focusing, the prefrontal cortex, and other parts of the brain that are required for cognition, for making thoughts and making decisions. Closing that process, as we said, if there's a beginning, middle, end, it stabilizes our mood. We immediately go, okay, time to rest. And we'll look at a couple of examples of that. And then the delayed gratification is simply a chance for us to check in with where we are, what we're doing, and what we need, because we don't get it right away. Okay. And famously, this was studied by Angela Duckworth, and this is the leading influence in developing grit. It's not the horrible experience and, having it and surviving it. It's the delayed gratification that builds grit and builds the perseverance to continue with something, even though there's no immediate reward, or maybe not a reward at all. Okay. So, sorry, let's look at the next one. So here's an example. If we are going to play a card game with your friends, okay? So it's not online, it's actual card game. And one thing I didn't include in here is just the tactile part of all of these things. All of our slow life activities tend to include a tactile sensation, and that is different from a screen. Curiosity. Okay, everybody gets 5 cards. I don't know. What are they? Am I gonna have a match? Can I create a match? Am I gonna win? Things like that. And then of course, frustration. Everything I pick up is not what I need. The closed process. This process is closed in many different places here. 1, we take turns, right? So when it's my turn starts, I start thinking about things, and then I make a decision or whatever, and my turn ends. And if you've ever watched people play, especially if they're like a little nervous about it or competitive, what do they do after their turn is over? Not almost instinctively. If they do this is instinctive. They go, right? They sigh. They kind of lower their arms, lower their shoulders. All right. And then refocus, because they've been a little more vigilantly focused on their own stuff. And now they might start looking around at other things. So that's that calming section. And that's a result of the closed process. But the game in and of itself has an end, a natural ending point. And then the delayed gratification can be a couple things. Like I said, it could be delayed until I get a card that I need. But even that, I'm just happy I got a match. The delayed gratification is in perhaps winning after playing several hands or several rounds. Or maybe I'm needing to track points, collect points, add points. So there's this time, this gap between what I'm doing and the result, right? Figuring out whether I've won or whether I want to keep playing and things like that. And then the actual reward feels good, but should feel good for a lot of people, even the people who don't win. If you win, yeah, you can be like, yay, I'm the winner, and that's just bragging rights. Some people do play for a prize, and that's fine. If you're not playing for a prize, if the reward is the fun you're having with your friends or your family, then that reward is for everyone. It's not tied to the winning of the points, right? It's tied to the process of the game. Yeah. So let's look at some other things. And I just want you to think about which of those, like the curiosity, the frustration, the closed process, and the delayed gratification, to what extent those show up in any of these. Sewing buttons on a shirt, juggling, writing a letter, baking a cake, knitting a scarf, folding laundry. I thought this one was interesting. Hold a meeting at the library. And I know many people do that, or hold a meeting at a coffee shop or somewhere. In other words, either out of the office, or even more importantly, not on a screen. Like just drawing, visual note taking. I taught that to my students all the time. Just adding to a weekly shopping list instead of impulse buying, going for a walk without your phone, developing film, taking pictures on a film camera and then developing that film. All of these would definitely fall under the category of slow life ideas. Notice none of them are like, and make sure you're dressed like this, and make sure your background looks like this. Stop comparing whatever you're doing, whatever you're experiencing, to something you see. How does this activity that I'm doing right now interact with the motivation stages of the dopamine loop? Take, for example, how does wanting that beautiful aesthetic, that beautiful kitchen, how does that interact with that stuff versus, baking a cake? And then also think about how you feel. And I really hope that you will spend more time focusing on that feeling part, especially before you go to the thinking part, because that's where you're going to be like, do those go together? So how does each activity interact with the physical sensations of a dopamine loop? So I hope that kind of helps. And that, like I say, you're not looking for something that checks all the boxes. It doesn't have to check all the boxes. If it's checking one of those boxes, so that's really what this is all about. And those of you who are offering some of these slow life activities on your channel or through your business, I want you to know why this is working, right? Why what you're offering is really important, what it's offering to different people depending on what they need, right? And obviously, I think we humans are feeling it. If you've experienced it before, which means you're probably like a millennial or older, you actually might be having a physical craving for that experience. And if you're younger than that, if most of your growing up time was spent, especially in school, was spent with more, iPads, computers, tablets, etc., tickets, rewards, things like that, and then now social media, if this has been the majority of your life, you might not really know, like, something's up, something isn't right, but you might not yet have totally experienced a long-term slow life activity the way that old people like me have. And so I'm going to continue to talk about this, and it does not mean it's right or wrong. It's my experience. Other people might be wanting to relive that experience. And hey, there are a lot of things that are not all that great. Like, I'm really glad I don't have to walk all the way from Chicago to New York City, or go in a buggy. I'm glad I can get on a plane and fly there. Like, progress is good. And so let's be really happy about that part. But also, we need a balance. And that's the problem, is there's literally no balance. Imagine if you had to fly your plane everywhere you went, you would know that's out of balance. So let's create that sense of balance again. This is my very, very, very first live. It is very small right now. I hope you'll watch this and give me feedback on mostly the thoughts of the content. Yeah, I want to hear about that. There's not a lot I can do about, how I talk and how I look, but how I use this tool of YouTube Live, I would really, really appreciate your tips on that, things I can do to improve that. As well as just like, what do you think about this topic? What you want to know more about or don't want to know more about? My hope is that we can use this channel to really start, two things. I want to teach the millennials who are like, I remember being a kid and experiencing this, but just so you know, what you experienced as a kid was not exactly what the adults were necessarily setting up. So I've learned that a little bit. So I want to kind of walk you through, oh, this is what we were actually doing and why. So I want to do that for my millennial parents, teachers, etc., who are wanting to bring that experience to their own children. And then also especially for teachers or young parents who never had that, because you might not have, especially a school experience that the millennials and up will be able to fall back on in their memory. I want to work on that with teachers, especially young teachers. This is why you're so frustrated. You're like, what's wrong with these kids? Well, there's a reason for it. And it's not a particular person's fault, but it is definitely something we can address together. So don't give up. Don't bail on your classroom, because if you went into teaching because you're an amazing teacher and you love kids, keep at it. But let me and the rest of the people at Rainy Day Plan support you. Okay? All right. Well, that's this for today. And hopefully the next time we'll see what happens then. I still might be talking to myself, as I've learned. Practice makes competent. I'm not going to say perfect, but it certainly builds my confidence and gives me more competence. All right. Thanks, everybody, and take care. How do I end this? Oh, they're probably with the button that says end stream.
I hope you enjoyed this peek into our mindful mini course. Please join us for our next YouTube Live or an upcoming training. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share.